I reached for the oven mitt to take the apple tarts out of the ovens. With a golden flaky crust, a mixture of cinnamon and red apples, and giving off the most heavenly aroma, they are my granddaughter Ginger's favorite. She texted me just a few minutes ago to let me know she was on her way. Since our houses are only a few blocks apart, well, as the crow flies anyway, she usually walked. There's a lovely wooded area between our houses, and the leaves are beautiful this time of year, with shades of red, gold, and yellow. I breathed in deeply as the fragrance of cut apples and cinnamon filled my little house. We weren't having lunch here because Ginger was bringing her new boyfriend to introduce him to me, and had originally planned to take us both out for lunch. I felt I might be intruding and decided to excuse myself. I hadn't been sleeping well lately, and had been informed by the doctor yesterday that I needed to slow down a bit, take more time off from work. Doctors. They always think they know what's best for you. But I have no intention of slowing down. I enjoy designing. I enjoy being creative. To see a beautiful shoe in my mind, and then to bring the design to life, and see someone else fall in love with it. What can I say? No other feeling compares. Now, my granddaughter Ginger has a head for the marketing side of the business. She's not so much into the creative aspect, but she's good at what she does, and I believe she loves the business the same as her mother and I have all these years. "Granny, you made me an apple tart." I heard her voice just seconds before the door bursts open. My beautiful grandchild, her shiny strawberry blonde curls hanging down to her waist. She reminds me of her mother at that age. Exuberantly, she threw her arms around me and squeezed me in a tight bear hug. To be 22 again. Not that I had that many regrets. Ginger's mother, my daughter Mimi, and I had built a wonderful design business together. Our specialty is stilettos, and some of our upcoming designs will compete with the likes of Bennis and Blahnik. Ginger has been working long hours the past 3 months to get the new line ready. The most recent designs we've named Cinderellas, with the slogan, "Shoes to make every girl feel like a princess." The business Mimi and I had built would be a wonderful legacy to pass on to Ginger and her children after her. The business is thriving, but recently we've had a series of designs stolen, so we've hired a private detective to find out who is responsible. We've all lost sleep in worrying over who would actually steal from us, and why. Hopefully this would all be straightened out soon, and we could get back to the business we love, that of designing the most gorgeous shoes in the world. "Where's that fella you've been hanging out with lately?" I teased Ginger as I hugged her in return. She smiled back cheerfully. "He said he'd meet me here." She dropped the briefcase next to her chair and picked up a tart to savor the smell before tasting. She sighed with enjoyment, but then leaned forward to look deeply into my eyes. "How are you feeling today, Granny? Did you keep your doctor's appointment yesterday? What did he say? Did he say you're under too much stress? Oh, and you're still joining us for lunch, aren't you? Well, now hold on. You haven't answered my question yet. But just so you'll stop worrying, I'm doing fine. I got a new prescription that's supposed to have me feeling right as rain in no time." I patted her cheek, watching the relief cross her face. "Where's that fella again? He sure does dress fancy for the country," I added in a sassy tone. She widened her eyes. "Granny, you stop it now. In our line of business, people pay us big money to dress like he does. I don't want him to think I come from a family of snobs." "Don't you tease him about it, you promise?" Young people sure know how to take all the fun out of a subject. When you're my age, one of the few fun things left in life is teasing young people. It keeps us all on our toes, the teasers and the teasees. "So what designs has your mother cooked up today?" I asked Ginger, nodding at the briefcase. My granddaughter hesitated for several seconds before shrugging. "I think she said something about working with suede," she replied offhandedly. But something in her expression made me look more closely. She seemed embarrassed or worried, maybe a combination of both. Before I could ask her any further questions, the doorbell rang. Ginger jumped up to open the door for her new boyfriend. She threw her arms around his shoulders, and when she drew away, He had one long curl twirled around his finger, admiring the lovely golden red strands. "Wolf, come meet my grandmother." And then he turned toward me. One look in those familiar eyes, and 40 years disappeared. "Millie?" I blinked. This young face, no matter how familiar, could not possibly know who I was, but I smiled gracefully. "Do I know you, young man?" Wolfram Rehnquist IV held out his hand for me to shake. "Please call me Wolf." He shook his head in amazement. "It's just that my grandfather has a picture of the two of you together at the Louvre. It's on the desk in his study. I must have seen it a million times. I'd recognize you anywhere." "So you are Wolf's grandson. You look very much like him, but I'm sure you've heard that before." I smiled back at him with a million questions buzzing around in my head. How much did he know about his grandfather's past? He must have heard his grandfather talk about me or about some of the things that had happened to us when we were younger, but just how much had his grandfather shared? Did he know that his grandfather had been involved in the mafia? Did he know how close his grandfather had come to spending his life in prison? When I first met Wolfram Rehnquist II, he was a young, spoiled rich boy with entirely too much time on his hands. Like most young men, he believed that he was immune to the harsher consequences of his choices. He was at that stage of his life when he wanted to defy his father in order to assert his independence, and he felt that by joining a group of similarly advantaged young men who made their own laws that he could break away from his father's strict rules and decisions. By the time he found out just what sort of men he had allied himself with, it was too late. He was in too deep, and trying to break away from that self-made mafia group was just as dangerous as remaining one of them. As one of his newer friends in Paris, he had confided in me all of the details, given me names, and told me all of the dangerous situations that he had been in. He didn't keep anything from me. At the time, I believed I was the only person that he felt he could trust with every single secret. And now, looking at his grandson, I was filled with so many questions about what his grandfather's life had been like since the day that we'd said goodbye. But in addition to those questions, I also wondered how his grandson had come to know my granddaughter. What curious circumstances had led to their becoming acquainted? The questions I wanted to ask were too personal for others to overhear. Ginger reminded Wolf that the reservation for lunch was at 1 o'clock at Manhattan's per se, and they'd need to leave soon. I'd considered turning down the invitation earlier, but now I knew that I could not pass up this chance. "I haven't had the opportunity to eat at this restaurant before. Are you sure I won't be in the way? If I am, just let me know. We could still make lunch another day." "Don't be silly, Granny. Of course you're always welcome." My granddaughter smiled warmly as she reached for her jacket and briefcase. Wolf was an excellent driver, and just less than an hour later we were seated at the restaurant, waiting for drinks and the menu, when Ginger glanced down at her vibrating cell phone. She looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, Granny. It's the office. I need to take this." She tapped the screen as she left the table. I leaned forward eagerly. "I was hoping to get a chance to ask you about your grandfather. How is he?" Wolf's eyes crinkled in the nicest way as he laughed softly. "Just wonderful, the feisty old codger." He glanced around, serious suddenly. "I, too, was hoping to speak with you more privately. The entire family appreciates everything you did for grandfather all those years ago, Millie. So many times we've heard about how you were the only one who truly believed in him. He wanted you to know how grateful he has always been that you provided that support for him at the time, when you and your testimony were the deciding factors in whether he would go to prison." He paused, adding kindly, "Please, I didn't mean to make you cry." His hand covered mine gently on the table. "I'm being silly, I know. I apologize for the display of emotion. How much did he tell you of the circumstances? Did he mention—" "Yes," he interrupted me. "I know that you were a junior undercover agent and that you gave up your career after the case was settled." His voice dropped again, and he glanced carefully around the sparsely filled dining room. It's because of your character and your past experience as an FBI agent that I have been authorized to share certain information with you right now. He said nothing for a couple of moments longer, and I mulled over his words, waiting for him to continue. Millie, we know you've hired a PI to investigate certain thefts in your business. We have reason to believe that a cartel operating out of Europe is involved with the thefts. The FBI has been tracking them for over 3 years now on various charges such as money laundering, but this is the closest we've ever come to the head of the entire cartel, known only by the name Big Red. With this statement, Wolf opened his jacket ever so slightly, showing me the badge pinned inside his left lapel. I recognized it only too well. He went on with his explanation. It's not what we would have wanted to arrest them for, but, he shrugged, we'll take a win however we can get it. I don't understand, I replied. You could have continued your own investigation without informing me. Wait, what aren't you telling me? Suddenly alarmed, warning bells were going off in my head. I knew I wasn't going to like this. Wolf sighed. There's no easy way to tell you, Millie. We believe Ginger is involved with the cartel. No! I spoke a little too loudly and a couple heads turned our way. I immediately lowered my voice. You must be mistaken. I only wish for your sake that we were. She's not only involved. She may possibly be one of the leaders of the entire group. We have every reason to believe that she is the member referred to as Big Red. We've been following her for about 8 months. It doesn't look good, Millie. I was sent to make contact with you and to determine how much, if anything, you might know about her involvement. Let me add that I was already inclined to trust your character because of your actions in regards to my grandfather over 40 years ago. Our inside contact tells us something big's going down soon. If Ginger is involved, she'll be in custody within 24 hours. He shook his head sadly. We wanted you to be aware of what's happening, so the shock won't be so difficult for you to handle. Let me add that I was already inclined to trust your character because of your actions in regards to my grandfather over 40 years ago. Our inside contact tells us something big's going down soon. If Ginger is involved, she'll be in custody within 24 hours. He shook his head sadly. We wanted you to be aware of what's happening, so the shock won't be so difficult for you to handle. Wolf's reassurance that my feelings were being taken into account by my previous employers did not ease the pain I felt over knowing my granddaughter was involved in the theft of the designs our family had worked so hard to produce. But there was some anger, too. How could she do this to us, and why? She stood to inherit everything. Did it mean nothing to her? And regardless of his statements that the FBI believed me to be unaware of any of my grandchild's actions, in the back of my mind, I was reevaluating recent incidents in this new light. Pieces of the puzzle were coming together and making sense now, and it appeared that my granddaughter might be the last puzzle piece that brought everything together. As I was silently deliberating the facts Wolf had divulged to me, his cell phone rang. He showed me the screen. It was Ginger. "What's up?" he inquired casually. After listening for a couple of seconds, he responded, "No problem. I'll make sure Granny gets home safely. Will I see you tomorrow?" "Great. See you then." Before turning to me, he ended the call and tapped one button and quietly issued instructions to the person on the other end of the phone. Wolf turned to me. Change of plans. Apparently, Ginger was on the phone a few minutes ago with her contact. The exchange is taking place right now. Wait here and someone will make sure that you get home. Can you do that? I apologize. I know what an ordeal this must be for you. I shook my head. I'll be all right. Thank you for everything. I hope you don't mind, young man, that I will still try to provide as much support for my grandchild as I am able. I can't help but feel we have let her down in some way for her to resort to criminal activities. Of course, I would expect nothing less, he responded warmly as he leaned over and hugged me briefly. "One last request," I added before he stood. "Tell your grandfather I still think of him often. I've always hoped he was living well." The irony of the situation had just occurred to me. As a young FBI rookie over 40 years ago, I had investigated his grandfather and proved his innocence. Now the grandson was investigating my granddaughter and had proven her guilt. I'd heard Wolf speak 4 words